Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? It is Halloween. Oh, I forgot to say Happy Halloween in our morning post. So Happy Halloween to those of you listening live, and happy crappy Halloween to those of you listening on podcast. Happy Halloween to you too, unless of course you're listening to this tomorrow, in which case, what are we on? Happy All Saints Day. I think I saw on my calendar that has all the holidays marked. All the holidays that you can think of to cram into a Western calendar. Anyway, is it All Saints Day tomorrow and All Souls Day the next day? That's what it looks like on the calendar. I thought it was the other. Well, I didn't think that there were two. I thought it was All Souls Day, period, tomorrow, and that was that. But I don't know anything about that stuff. I never do. I just read what's on the calendar to you. And today's Halloween, and also an eye doctor appointment for my oldest son. So happy eye doctor appointment day. That's the way I'm going to be thinking of it from here on in. And lots to catch up on. Of course, it is Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. And that means Greg Dworkin. And if we're lucky and everybody's feeling good and, nothing crazy happens between now and, 10:15, Joan McCarter as well. Always a good day of the week. Easy for me. I enjoy it. And, of course, you probably enjoy hearing another voice once in a while, too. Probably could use more of that, I think. Maybe we'll work on that in the near future. I don't know what I'm making promises for at this point in the morning. No point in doing that. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Kagro X, that's me, and Greg Dworkin, that's them from Connecticut, and Joan McCarter, that's Joan McCarter, all of our Twitter handles. Serve up a tasty Halloween breakfast. Oh, I had forgotten. What's a traditional Halloween breakfast? I can't even get through Bill's tweet without stopping for comment. Serve up a tasty Halloween breakfast of fresh eye of newt and head of Jacob Wall. Yes, the butt of all of Twitter's jokes this morning and last evening. Jacob Wall, I feel like we did a great job. That is to say, I feel like I did a good job reading Twister Cat's tweet yesterday. I believe it was Twister Cat who brought it to our attention that this crazy story was percolating up and that all of the Washington journalists who had been approached about this stupid thing were warning that it would break at some point, that it was weird and fake, and boy, did it deliver. And so everybody spent the afternoon laughing at Jacob. He is the guy, I know nothing about him, except that he was the guy who previously had tweeted like 25 times that he had, I assume, not really been doing this, but that he kept saying that he was overhearing in an LA hipster coffee shop. Do they have hipster coffee shops in LA? That he had overheard some varying groups of young-ish people whispering to one another secretly, hiding it from the rest of the obviously liberal hipsters in this LA coffee shop, that they were in fact Trump fans. And somebody has a great compilation of literally something like 25 different tweets, all based on the same premise, that he had just left at a hipster LA coffee shop and overheard a group of young-ish people saying, oh, I support Kavanaugh, oh, I support Trump, all kinds of insane garbage. And I just thought, okay, well, so he's this idiot kid, and this is the sorts of thing that he does all the time, and whatever. And as it turns out, he was a major part of this plot. We could read some of the stories. There are several write-ups that attempt to explain what actually went on here, but I think most people have gotten the key idea here is Jacob Wall is terrible at hoaxing people, and I guess the whole thing collapsed when some of the news outlets, particularly NBC, that he was trying to bait with this story. And I guess do I understand it correctly? They had a story about they were going to try and spread rumors that Robert Mueller had been involved in a rape, that he had raped somebody, a coworker or something at some point earlier in his career, and that was never really going to fly anyway. But then the whole thing was, well, the backup plan is if people believe it at first and then debunk it and say, you lied to us, then they were going to spring the trap and say, ha, yes, we did lie to you. We were trying to trap you. And it worked. And I don't know. I'm not certain how that was supposed to go exactly, but the thing fell apart when people noticed that the private investigators that this person, that Jacob Wall claimed had done the work of uncovering this previously hidden story, was one, fake, and two, that their telephone number forwarded to Jacob Wall's mother's voicemail, or a voicemail box that was owned by her that I guess he had reprogrammed to try and sound like it was the office of this stupid investigative firm. And he filled out their web page full of their personnel page on their web page with stock photos, but he very often chose photos of people who were actual celebrities that he either didn't realize were celebrities or thought no one else would realize were celebrities. There's a lot of terrible, terrible work that went in behind this, and a lot of fake news stories yesterday. And many of you are sharing this one because we spent a hell of a lot of time on it eventually yesterday. Not just the original story, but we used it as a launching pad to get into a more interesting story. But our starting point, many of you remember, was the fake rabbi that Mike Pence somehow arranged to be with him at a political event some days ago in order to open the event with a prayer, because that's what Mike Pence is about. And he thought, I will show sensitivity to the Jewish community, just having suffered this terrible tragedy in Pittsburgh, by having the opening prayer offered by a rabbi. But being Mike Pence, he couldn't stomach going forward with an actual Jewish rabbi, so he got a messianic Jewish rabbi to give the opening prayer to be sure that the prayer would be to Jesus, so that he would feel comfortable with it, and maybe then his wife would let him go on with the rally, I guess. I don't want any prayers to weird moon gods or anything, so make sure it's a Jesus one. So he went out and got a messianic Jewish rabbi, and everybody complained, that's wrong, that's fake, that's not a Jewish person, period. And then we spent the rest of the show talking about what is a Jewish person. Then, today it turns out that guy who was supposed to be the messianic Jewish rabbi isn't even one of those. He actually was, well, they say defrocked because that's the term that we generally use for people who lose their official ordination, which is what happened, although here comes the Messianic Jewish Council trying to get him back, I guess they're calling up. And so he's not even the fake rabbi he said he was. He's a fake rabbi. It's been 15 years since he lost his credentials, such as they are, as a fake rabbi. So I don't know what's going on over at the Pence shop, but I also don't care a great deal. But I do care about Greg Dworkin, who is here patiently waiting for his turn to fake things up.
You have your show.
Oh, well, okay. Well, we're working on the schedule first.
Hi, how you doing?
Okay, how are you? You need a minute to arrange your schedule? That's fine. We got
my schedule's all set. Thanks.
Okay, excellent.
Phone rang.
Yeah.
And
where's Abby?
Everything's.
Is Abby around?
So,
does she want to talk?
One of the funniest things about that, many funny things about the Jacob Wall thing.
Yes.
Is that when he set up that phony website?
Yes.
Not only did he use people like Bar Raffaele and Sigourney Weaver's husband as the mugshots, but there was a call this number if you want to contact the firm. Yes. And when you call it, you get his mother's voicemail.
Now, did he not bother to change the answer? I thought my first read was...
I don't know, but there's new Twitter accounts called Jacob Wald's mother. And, that's why all of that stuff's coming out. But,
she's not angry. She's disappointed.
Right. But people who say he's as dumb as a potato, I mean, then all these stories came out about, what it was like when he was working in the financial industry
yes,
and then was
right.
getting banned
I forgot that one.
for being just a complete idiot. That happened when he was in his 20s. I guess he's in his early 30s now.
Oh, that's too bad.
People
He survived
who were
that
in the
long.
financial industry were talking about how we would come into the office and say, I want this startup. You have to give me $25 million. Also staff, phones. You have to give me a car.
Yeah.
And I'll get back to you about how things go.
Yeah, and then
But you got to sign on soon because this other competitor is going to, want to do this.
Right. I mean, a classic scam, and it was transparent immediately, and it didn't work. And then I guess the rest of the story is they later got a call from another firm saying, "Did you say you would recommend him?" Because he just came here and said you would do that. And what a I don't know what to say. There's some, gumption with this guy. Chutzpah, we would say, but we're fake. So
right. So anyway,
Yes.
that's
What a story.
going on. The idea of the fake rabbi coming to the Jewish funerals, and of course, the thing about those sorts of things, it's horrible, it's tragic, but with the typical very dark humor that has gotten Jewish folk through all sorts of trials
Yes.
and tribulations. You think of it in terms of food, right? Because one of the things you do is eat, and you wonder whether that messianic rabbi actually brought BLTs and ham sandwiches to the funerals just to make nice to
Right.
the locals,
Yeah, because he's.
I mean, it was
sensitive
about that
guy.
sensitive in terms of having that sort of appearance. And the bottom line is, Donald Trump is being forced by events because controller in chief is part of the job description
Yes.
to push a concept of unity. And it's
Yeah.
really pissing him off because he's trying to be divisive. He's got an election to win.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to be unifyingly divisive. And he's very frustrated that all this funeral stuff in Pittsburgh is knocking his caravan off the news, and he's not able
Right.
to completely control the flow of news as he normally does. And it's terribly frustrating to him that he can't do that. So then he throws in the birthright thing. Let's hear another shiny object. Let's make people chase it. How am I going to get people to talk about this? All they want to talk about are things like MAGA bombers and caravan killers and stuff like that, and people who they say I'm inspiring to violence. That's no good. That's not going to help us in the election, which is its only way of looking at the world.
Yes.
So I know. I'll talk to Axios. I'll give them an interview and throw them a shiny object. They'll go with it.
They
And
did.
of course they did. And they look even worse today because the whole idea is stupid, and it's clearly a shiny object trying to distract people. So now he's back tweeting about the caravan and how he's going to send the military down there. But of course, the lawyers
2
have
weeks.
to explain all the Latin stuff to us regular folks. But the posse comitatus stuff and legalese means that you can't send the military down there to be law enforcement. That's
Right.
not allowed by the Constitution.
Another
They
smart
can,
play.
clean things up, and they can stack stuff, and they can sweep, and they can, take binoculars and look at the board. They can't really do anything.
Scrub the garbage cans. They do that well.
Yeah. Or do KP duty and clean up the butts and stuff like that. But they can't
What?
do anything. But they're getting sent down there anyway. And the numbers that Trump is throwing around, because every time he tweets, it grows by another couple thousand. So apparently we have more troops going down there than we have in Syria right now. And by
well,
this
that's
afternoon, I presume we'll have more troops than we had in World War II.
That's true. We have more troops under arms than there, in fact, than the Chinese army. So it's huge. Has he bumped the number up again? 14,000
And the best, though,
was
just the best.
Oh yes,
I don't know,
well,
5,000,
tremendous,
7,000.
huge.
I don't know what it is up to.
I saw 14 yesterday. So
Oh, okay.
We'll
21,
see.
28. Sounds like a football game.
yeah,
So, we don't know. But it's just bizarre behavior. And literally what he's doing is trying to distract you from the fact that there's an election and the Republicans aren't particularly doing well. To give you an idea of how they're not doing well,
yes,
LA Times, the Dorn's Life poll comes out today, USC, and this is the poll that suggests that Trump was going to win the election in 2016. and they have a generic Democratic ballot lead of 17 points, which is certainly raising some eyebrows. That might actually suggest this thing that we political professionals, who I am not, call a wave.
Yes.
Where's the wave? What happened to the wave? Oh, maybe it's a wave.
Surfing.
So they are worried, quite worried, that they're going to lose the House. And to give me, again, another idea of how that comes up, here's some of the polling that just happened from the New York Times yesterday. Some of these are actually in progress. They're not quite done. So we're conducting polls of the following races: California 45, the Democrat Porter 48, Mimi Walters, the incumbent, 45, New Jersey 7, Malinowski 46, Leonard Lance, the incumbent Republican, 39, Iowa, Finkenauer 46, Bloom 38. These are pretty impressive numbers for what are supposed to be battleground districts. This is why they're doing them.
Yes.
Right? They're polling here because they're supposed to be really close in battlegrounds. California 48 with Rohrabacher. He's got a 46-44 lead in polling that's not quite done. This stuff isn't quite done yet. In Virginia 7, a little closer to you, Spanberger and Dave Bratt are tied in a district that used to be represented by Eric Cantor.
Yes.
Kansas 2, 41% for Davis, 37% for Watkins. North Carolina, 9. Can the religious right hold a red seat in North Carolina? This is Harris, 45, McCready, 44. If I'm not mistaken, Mark Harris is the former fire and brimstone pastor at 45. And the Democrat, Dan McCready, businessman, is at 44. These are very, very encouraging numbers for the Democrats. The Republicans are winning by a point when they're winning at all, and the Democrats are winning by pretty big numbers when they're winning here. And so these just completed or not even completed polls are suggesting that there certainly is a little bit of a movement toward Democrats in the last week. And what could that possibly be? Well, probably the bomber and the Pittsburgh scenario where Trump is put in his worst possible light trying to be a human being. And when he tries to do that, it always comes across very poorly, just as, for example, his stunt, and it was a stunt, of trying to go to Pittsburgh to console people when they really didn't want him there. He went anyway.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing more Trumpian than that, right?
Yes, right.
We don't want you to come. We don't want, okay, well, I'm coming.
Right. That's basically it. And I guess he's tweeting his complaints this morning.
About what?
Well, he's trying to pretend he wasn't upset about things, but everybody noting that it is, 24 hours, I guess, since he showed up, maybe 20 hours since he showed up, and it's already everybody noting all your tweets about Pittsburgh are about how it was for you, which is interesting. Because
everything is about, the whole thing about being a malignant narcissist is that everything is about you.
Yes.
Right? And so that hasn't changed. What has changed a little bit is the coverage of it.
Okay.
As little by little, the media gets a little tired of this.
Yeah, well, it's easy to do that.
Jay Rosen was pointing this out yesterday. For example, AP would tweet out something like, Trump says he's going to change the birthright situation, and then they retweet, we're sorry we tweeted that. It turns out that's not true. He can't. Little things like that. The Axios gleeful interview of him where they put out that story was the rule, not the exception. And it seems to be turning into the exception and not the rule these days, because stuff he says actually starts to get fact-checked. People are starting to use the truth sandwich. Some outlets are better at it than others. One of the worst outlets is the New York Times. NPR is getting better about it. They're retracting tweets or saying we misinterpreted or misinformed you. What he said wasn't true. This is the kind of stuff that has to happen more and more and more. Jay Rosen is noticing it is happening more and more. Not enough, but at least it's starting. And that's really how you have to handle Trump. You can't treat what he says as truth. There's no objective both sides to it when you know he's lying.
Right.
Now, we said that from the beginning, and it's taken about 2 years for the media to catch on, but, they're slow.
Yes, and actually, I'm sure many people would say we've been saying that for much, much longer, but we've been saying that about Donald Trump.
We've been saying that since Iraq, but we've been saying that about Donald Trump for about 2 years.
Probably before that, and Vietnam, and I don't know, Korea, who knows? What else? Okay.
So that's the basic situation here. We have specific things going on. We have early voting in Nevada, which is still looking reasonable. Florida early voting, which is looking reasonable, which is to say both of those are going to be very, very close, tight contests. It was interesting because in the beginning, if you're going to go by traditional patterns, what happens is that a lot of people in Nevada live in Clark County, Las Vegas, and Washoe, where Reno is. And Democrats need to win those areas in order to win statewide because the rural areas are very Republican, although much more sparsely populated. And typically what you would do is run up the score, especially in Clark County, Las Vegas, where most of the people are. And what you would do is, try to build a 30,000 vote firewall, as John Ralston calls it, and then withstand whatever happens both on Election Day and the rest of the state. As it turns out, we're already at that 30,000 firewall. That still might not be good enough because the rural areas are turning out in much greater numbers than a typical midterm. And the rural areas presumably are going to vote for Republicans. So now the goal is to try to get a 40,000 firewall. And we're at 31,000 as of now, and we still have 3 days of usually more solid Democratic voting at the end of the 2-week voting period, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, including today. The Democrats generally come out more, and Monday, Tuesday, early in the week is generally better for Republicans. I don't know why, but that's been the pattern for years. And so we might hit that 40,000 firewall, and then we'll have to see what happens. Of course, the other part of it is that in Nevada voting, 20% of the vote isn't Democratic or Republican. It's other. It's no party affiliate. And we don't know how they're going to break. If they break Democratic, it'll be a slim but solid win for Jackie Rosen over Dean Heller, the Republican incumbent. And if they break the other way, then it'll be a closer race. So we're watching that very closely. It's encouraging, but hardly in the bag. Nobody's saying, okay, we have that one. Nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that about Florida.
Even you
the Florida numbers are also very encouraging in the sense that if you compare it to previous years, we're doing a little bit better, but the Republicans are still ahead. As of 7:30 this morning, because they report their numbers every morning at 7:30, the Republican edge, according to Steve Shell, is now 1.8%. And it's been much higher in the past. They have a 63,000 vote lead. In 2014, they had a 133,000 vote lead. So we're doing better than before. Usually the end of week and especially the weekend numbers are better for Democrats. Nevada stops voting on Friday, but Florida stops early voting on Sunday, so we get a couple of weekend days in there that Nevada doesn't have. And we'll have to keep an eye on those and see whether or not they are more Democratic, as it usually is. The electorate seems to be a bit more diverse. It seems to be a little browner. It seems to be a little younger than previous years, but enough to really make a difference. It's Florida, so nothing's taken for granted until the final votes are in.
Okay. Well, then I will make a point of not taking it for granted, though I take your reporting of it as granted. But I'm
right.
pleased
So,
for
there's nothing about this that's saying, oh, my gosh, we're getting blown out. And there's nothing about this that's saying we're blowing them out. Again, wave elections mean you win close races. So that means it's going to be a close race, and you're going to have to bite your knuckles until Wednesday morning. One of the nice things about Daily Kos's schedule is that I put up the pundit roundup on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. So I generally get to post the day after elections. Sometimes that's bad, but I'm just looking forward to next week because I'm thinking it's going to be good.
Well, I hope so. And, I'm sure you're looking forward to that. And, I look forward to hearing the results. So
I'm just looking as we wait for the break. I'm looking at Jacob Wall's mom. That's the Twitter account that went up yesterday.
Yes.
It says, what a monumental frickin' disappointment you've turned out to be, Jacob. That's the tweet.
Does he live there? He may live at home. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
You used her voicemail.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I don't know. I don't understand really what the White House and the Republicans are thinking.
Oh, well.
I don't understand why.
Generally?
For example, it's given conventional wisdom. Oh, it's a smart move by Trump because being divisive and being a jerk and being a complete moron is playing to his base, and that's smart politics. And that's just so embedded in the conventional wisdom. What if it's not smart politics? What if it turns out that the base is really small and that most people don't really like that? What if him encouraging mega bombers and caravan killers isn't a good thing? What if it turns out that going to Pittsburgh and looking like you're not wanted and alone and a loser is really not good for getting out your votes? And what if it turns out that appealing to Nazis is only a limited play? What if all of those things turn out? One of the nice things about Wednesday next week is if it turns out that the Democrats do well in the election, we can start ripping apart some of this stupid conventional wisdom that may, in fact, be nothing close to the truth.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I guess we should probably spend some time, not too much, but maybe spend some time thinking about or trying to predict how I guess journalists and conventional wisdom consumers will extricate themselves from that and try and save their previous work. Or will they just abandon it?
Because they've started to do that. 538 actually is putting out some guides to journalists. How do you interpret the election? What's a good night? What's a bad night?
Yeah.
We'll get to that after the break.
Well, good. I'm glad we were able to divide the labor on that because it would be another task on the list. But I really would like to see some predictions about how people will, how do you come around to saying, well, it's actually genius because it now clarifies issues for 2020 or something. And Trump, at no expense to himself, no risk to his own office, has tested themes on the backs of others, and they pay the political price. And now he can go into 2020 more focused than ever to bring his populist message. I'm thinking that that's how they could do this, as opposed to reporting the truth, which is they got wiped out. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and we continue on with Greg's Roundup here. Let's see, okay, I've got your tweet here about the Democratic Narrative Builder, little helpful guide from Micah Cohen and 538, is that right?
Yeah, which is funny because Nate Silver disagreed with him. It was fun watching him argue.
Okay. See, that's
I'm going to send you Nate's. Nate has a different approach.
All right.
And they're arguing about what's easier to understand for you little people out there.
Oh, I see. Oh, good. Thankfully. Micah's got a nice little chart that makes a certain amount of sense to me. We'll see what Nate's got.
I just sent Nate so you can see the difference. He wrote back and said, Micah, that's okay, but my approach is better. And I'm not really sure. So Micah Cohen has this narrative
probably
builder.
More detailed, but yeah.
And he says, basically, here's how it works.
Okay. Start with
for the House. 15 seats or less for the Democrats is bad.
Yeah, so it'll be a bad night. Okay.
Right? Neutral is 16 to 25 seats.
Yes, okay. So a 16 to 25 seat gain in the House is like Okay.
But that wouldn't give us the majority, except, at the tail end of that. 25. So good would be 26 to 35, a clear win. A wave is 36 to 45 pickups. Okay. And a tsunami is more than 46.
All right. So I think
it's understandable. I don't agree with his categories, but it's understandable.
Yes. I think you had said earlier a lot of the conventional wisdom was that 40-plus seat pickup would be wave.
Yeah, more than
threshold.
35 is a wave.
So, yeah, okay. So 36 to 45 is not out of keeping with that. And I think his chart is
and
understandable.
the prediction is for 40, 39, 40.
Okay, so
Right? So the
great.
prediction is for a wave. And
he's
tsunami
got a
is more than
Senate
that.
line and a governor line as well.
The Senate line is if the Democrats lose 2 seats or more, it's bad. It's neutral if they only lose 1. I think that's correct. It's good if we keep it even, and it's a wave if we pick up a seat.
Yes. Tsunami
I think
is
that's
2.
correct.
Yeah,
And then the
okay.
governor he's looking at in terms of population,
Yeah.
which I think is a little confusing. So Nate says, no,
is.
my way's better. Look,
All right.
if the GOP keeps it less than 23 seats, that is to say, if they keep the House,
Yeah.
that's bad for Democrats, and the GOP's exceeded expectations.
Okay.
Also, for the Senate, if the GOP picks up 3 seats or more, they had a great night. And then
Okay.
for governor, if they win the high-profile toss-up, so he's talking about the Scotts, Scott Walker, Rick Scott, if they keep those, then it's a very good night for them,
Okay.
right? Meets expectations, Nate says, is Democrats 23 to 39 seats. That is to say, just barely taking the House, but taking the House meets expectations. And I think that's correct.
Okay.
And then 40 seats or more is terrific. And then for the Senate, I think he's got a much more realistic. The GOP has a great night if they pick up 3 seats. They meet expectations if it's 2 seats or Democrats pick up 1.
Okay.
And then Democrats exceed expectations if the Democrats pick up 2 or more seats and actually wind up running the Senate.
That would be nice.
So I think at this point, picking up a Democratic seat, going to a 50-50 instead of a 51-49, I don't think that meets expectations. I think that exceeds expectations.
You're right.
Because
I think so.
the way that the narrative has been set over the last week is that the Republicans hold the Senate and maybe pick up seats. If they don't pick up seats, a neutral Senate, a 51-49 Senate, or even a 50-50 Senate is a loss for them, the way things are right now.
Okay.
And then for the governor, the Democrats win majority of population, high-profile toss-ups, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Ohio, Wisconsin. And you split those, and that's about what's expected. Maybe we win Florida, maybe we lose Georgia. Maybe we win Ohio with Cordray, maybe we lose Kansas, and Kobach wins. Kobach.
Whatever his name is, yes. Okay.
So of those 5, if you go 3 and 2, whichever direction, that's about meets expectations.
All right.
And exceeding expectations for the Democrat is if you take most or all of those states for the governors. I think that's right. The only thing that I would disagree about is meeting expectations in the Senate. The expectation now is that a 51-49 Republican Senate, which it is right now, would be a win for the Democrats if they can just hold it to that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we've been saying for a long time.
Okay, I'll go with ours.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think
that's a good idea in expectation setting.
I think so.
It's ridiculous to say, well, they won 41 seats, obviously a big disappointment for Democrats, or that they came 1 vote short of taking the House. What a great night for them. That would not be a great night.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that I don't know what the dispute really is between them. It's the numbers, the threshold, I guess. But
it almost doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
It's
not
the
a huge
presentation
dispute.
of it, which table is easier to read, and especially about the governors because they
The
keep
same
talking about
table.
populations.
Yeah.
And that's not what really people care about. They want to know if they won Florida, if they won Wisconsin, if they won Georgia.
Yes,
That's what they want to know.
that's
Did we
true.
win Kansas? Did we win Ohio?
I would
Yes or
say
no?
they both copped out on the gov line.
So
I
I
don't know
like
what
the
that's
idea
supposed to
that if
mean.
you take 3 out of 5, that meets expectations, and if you take 4 out of 5, that exceeds expectations
That's
for either
helpful.
party. I like that. That's pretty simple.
Yes. Yeah, but looking at the way they both laid them out in the charts, okay, I haven't even read it yet, and I understand what they're both saying about the House and the Senate. The governor's race, I don't know what motivated them to do things this way. They
I
should
know, it's
call
weird.
states.
It's by
hard.
population. No, it's by yard
I don't know
signs.
what
No,
that's
it's by
supposed to mean.
surface area. No, it's by, that's none of that is helpful.
Average annual rainfall.
You either win more than 3 out of 5,
Yeah.
or you
What
don't.
they're saying is they can't make a call in those states, and it's tough. So, okay, fair
It
enough.
is tough. Anyway, but what's good It's the whole idea of thinking about where you think we're going to be on Wednesday morning so you can set those expectations.
Yes.
Right? And that's why losing the House for the Democrats would be such an incredible disappointment. We really expect to win.
Yeah.
All the data says we are.
Well, I will tell you how I feel about data on Wednesday.
Exactly. So, the idea, but be realistic about it. We're not getting 197 seats. Gain.
Why not? I think this is possible.
Yeah. Well, I would like to get 500 seats.
Yeah, I would like to get the 14,000 that we're sending to the border.
Yeah, I would like to get as many seats as there are in the New Hampshire,
Yeah, well, that's being
What's that,
unrealistic.
14,890? I mean,
Right.
It's just, I don't understand how a small state like New Hampshire has like one representative for each person.
Well, that's direct democracy, like the Greeks
It
used
is.
to do.
Why don't we all just go and have a giant town meeting?
I don't know why they don't. I can't think of any
Anyway,
reason.
so there's all
Not
of
enough
that.
guns, I guess, to go around.
So that's where we are in the election, at least as far as that goes.
Yes.
I'm still shaking my head because
SMH.
the part that's really come out this week
Yes.
between Trump's inability to be a human being and the stuff that he's pushing between the caravan and the birthright stuff. Adam Davison had a phenomenal little tweet storm about that. He says, "Dear media, here's the clear truth. Donald Trump is explicitly seeking to turn America into a white ethno-state. He's following an openly racist plan crafted by open racists." He's talking about Stephen Miller here, but a little bit of Steve Bannon too. "If you report this story any other way, you are not reporting the facts of being objective. If you think this is an extreme position or an opinion, you haven't read enough about the white nationalist movement, Stephen Miller, Bannon, Sessions, etc. Eliminating birthright citizenship is a central plank in a well-articulated, coherent movement to make America whiter. Blaming Soros is a central tool." And that's the phenomenal thing. It may be that Steve Stivers has denounced the Nazi Steve King in Iowa, but they still are running anti-Soros commercials.
Yes.
Still. Blaming Soros is a central tool. It's part of a crazy, wrong, but internally coherent theory of the case. By nature, people can only form society with their closer kin. Yada, yada, the arguments are terrible. White people have certain values that non-whites don't. Continuing the white power explanation, all whites by nature would know they only want a white society. An outside group, it's the Jews, is tricking them into going against their nature. White nationalists think they know a lot about human nature.
Yes.
And so there's an existential race to save America. By 2046, it'll become majority minority. And by the way, if you see 2046 thrown around, that's why. I do see that on occasion in tweets. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like the 88. You have to go look it up.
It's not a Hitler
By
thing.
2046, it'll become majority minority. And then, in this fevered, nonsensical view, there will be a civil war because unlike people cannot form stable societies. So the solution in their minds is twofold. Slow down minority growth through expulsion, denial of citizenship, closing borders to non-whites, and the decrease in immigration movement is exactly that. Awake and unite white identity by scaring them about brown people. The white nationalists have an open debate about the Jewish question. They just call it the JQ, which boils down to some think Jews are white and others think Jews are the cause of the de-whitification of America. And that's their Jewish question. They can't decide the answer to that.
Oh, well, that's
Every
a better
reporter
question.
covering Trump should know this argument, its vocabulary, and key points. You no longer have any questions about what Trump is up to. You will no longer be able to cover the story as a case of two sides with extremes or as a tentative debate. You'll be able to cover Trump properly, objectively, truthfully. You will not see him as a nut job who spouts off like Archie Bunker. He's a grifter con man who wants to make money and hide his ill-gotten gains and is also deeply racist.
Yes.
All right, almost done here.
Oh, okay.
He has learned, as so many awful leaders have before, that your corruption will go unchecked if you embrace the ugliest forms of nationalism, and he's found a coherent movement with a thickly drawn ideology and game plan, hired their proponents, and applied their language. Journalists covering Trump, please, 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 for the sake of the country, go read, go study. Understand JQ 2046, why wrongly white power folks think evolutionary kinship preferences can only be racial. It's ugly work, but it is your job. And one last thing, he's asking one of the other Twitter people, Andrew Morantz, can you draw up some kind of reading list, podcast listening for people to learn that world? I hate to promote such things, but people got to learn what's out there.
Yes. Well, focus on the investigative reporters for that. The rest have neither, what was it? Neither the time nor the legal expertise to figure this stuff out.
Yeah,
I think that was
something like
Joe
that.
Klein's excuse for, I don't know. I guess I'm not going to learn about it. Well, look, I hope they do. It's a good point. Well expressed, but you know how, well, there are deadlines.
Right. Well, again, that's one of the reasons I find cable news coverage in particular, because I think the written news is doing a better job with this. But when cable, does the both sides thing, it's just so infuriating because it's not. There's nothing normal about pushing this birthright stuff, going to Axios and planting these stories and trying to make a big deal. And it's very revealing and ought to be explored further that Trump is getting angry that his caravan stuff isn't dominating the news the way he wants to. Yes. That should be the story, not the caravan.
Well, yeah. However,
to some it is, and that's getting out there. And he's getting frustrated because what he's trying to do really isn't working.
Yeah. Well,
the other side of the coin, though, we talked about this earlier in the week and last week, is that a lot of his caravan nonsense is actually motivating Democrats. So we'll see.
Yes. Well, that's what they say. Although they tried very hard for a long time to say that wasn't it. It turned out just not to be true. And that's so good. They did. The only way to find out whether the media thinks they were right is wait a week and see if they shut up about the thing. Once you tell them they're wrong, they never say, "Oh, you're right, I was wrong." They just stop saying it. So you have to wait. It's a delayed reaction.
I don't have it in front of me, but both Nate Silver and Dave Weigel were tweeting interesting things about why does everybody always assume that Trump playing to the base is smart politics? What makes it smart politics? Why do people think that that's actually a winning move?
Because a president is doing it. This is also part of the, the normalization game. A president is doing it, and presidents are smart politicians by definition, typically, because that's how you're supposed to get there. Of course, if you cheat and use Russia, then we never get to really find out whether, your strategy is validated or not.
Well, that's why we like to use the meme of the day, right? Because I think after the election, that's why I'm looking forward to Wednesday morning. Because, the headline's going to be something along the lines of, Trump is a stupid jerk, and it just might work.
It's genius the way he's stupid.
It's genius. He's a genius, and it just might work to motivate the Democrats.
Yeah, well.
But it just might work headlines. I mean, they've been all over the place this week.
Yeah.
Trump is doing this. He's ginning up this. He's doing that, and it just might work. It works for who? What are you talking about? That 17-point generic lead? Is that what you're talking about?
This is why we have to get those meddling kids to vote. They're the only ones that can blow up the "it just might work" things.
That's certainly part of it. We have Mad Hatters tweeting to us, unlikely are turning out in Texas. Through 8 days, 27% of Harris County in-person early voters voted in one or none of the last 3 general elections. That's good. Let's get those unlikely voters out there.
Well, that's why they purge those people in most states. If you're wondering, why is it that, like, for instance, that Georgia, among every other reason, every other thing they use for purging, a very popular one is, well, if you've registered but you haven't voted in the last 3 elections, we'll purge you. And right now, it's a smart call by vote-suppressing white nationalists. They say it's a pretty good bet that the only way we'll be defeated is if people who don't typically come out. Well, we should do something about that. And if they do come out, we have to make sure they can't cast a ballot. Purge them now.
Right. Simple things. Jimmy Carter came out in Georgia. He's from Georgia. And said, you know what? Brian Kemp should disqualify himself as Secretary of State while he's running for office.
Yes.
It's really not fair, and it doesn't look good.
No.
Simple, duh kind of stuff. Well, yeah, he should. Why is he doing this?
I don't know.
Well, in order to keep power.
Oh. Yeah.
So anyway, that's where we stand. We'll have more to say about it tomorrow. We'll have more numbers from Nevada and Florida tomorrow, although the Florida numbers really shouldn't change all that dramatically till the weekend. Nevada today should be a good day for Democrats, and tomorrow we should know that. So we'll get to talk about Nevada a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then we'll see what's happening on the bacon and ham question about Mike Pence's fake rabbis.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else could come out about that story. I'm just curious because,
I'm just waiting to find out that fake rabbi is actually Jacob Ball's father.
That could be. that
and
may
you gotta
be
tie all this stuff together. There's always a core, grand, uniting theory here.
Yes. Well, it'll all be tied together. That's part of the charm of the show. Eventually, we'll tie it all together, even if it doesn't make any sense.
Right, and if we don't, we'll just tie up loose ends in some other way. So that's what's going on in the world today. Yes. Take care, you folks in Virginia.
All right.
Here in Connecticut, we're watching fall come, and it's lovely. But we'll be back tomorrow. I always enjoy spending a little bit of time talking to my good friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning, whose show, by the way, it is. And those listeners and tweeters are correct. I wish you wouldn't interrupt me so much. So we'll be back tomorrow, so you can try doing it again. I won't let you, but we'll try. And thanks for listening, folks. Joan will be on a little bit. She'll get her views about what's going on. She's from a different part of the country, the part I've heard about.
Yes.
But not visited.
Oh, well, there's always time.
There's always time. It's on my bucket list. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Very good. Okay, thanks, Greg. Let's see. What shall we do next? Let's see. Plenty to sample from here. Let's dive into, let's see, shall we go to Twitter first or Pocket first? Let me see if we can run down the list of stories that caught my attention, some of which rose to the level of stories we must discuss, and then others simply floating around the flotsam and jetsam of the stories. We should mention this either because it's funny or in some way crucial or essential to know about, but we just don't know enough about it yet. Let's see. I was struck by this thing. I guess since we were on we're always on immigration as a topic, and how we're reacting to it. It struck me sort of off the cuff here today. I saw a Lindsey Graham tweet going by. Lindsey Graham giving us further evidence of his Trumpification. And most people who were commenting on this tweet were using it for that purpose, just to recall how during his own ridiculous presidential bid, Lindsey Graham was essentially trying to position himself as a never-Trumper. He lost. I guess. He lost pretty egregiously. He was wiped out, and one of the earliest dropouts, as I recall. So maybe his political analysis of the situation was, I've just read the Republican Party and the future of the Republican Party incorrectly, and the place to be is in the Trump camp. And ever since, it's been horrible, of course, to watch. But I guess he acted this out yesterday by coming out in favor of the Trump proposed birthright citizenship changes. And still lots of issues swirling around, what to even call this thing. He tweets, finally, a president willing to take on this absurd policy of birthright citizenship. Now, before we even get to that, I will note for the record that last night, who did we see tweeting this? Abby Phillip from Washington Post. She's which? Yes, that's right. ABC News. Former Washington Post. Now CNN, former Washington Post, ABC News, and Politico. I think the number of jobs people move through is probably about as ridiculous as anything else about this story. But I saw her tweeting. I saw it last night. When did she actually tweet it? We'll see if I can come up with this thing. Yeah, here's the tweet. So it was actually yesterday morning. I didn't see it until yesterday evening. Heard a reporter today call birthright citizenship a policy. Now, a reporter probably, I don't know whether reporters started it or elected officials started it, chicken, egg, I guess it doesn't really matter. They are bouncing that around, but she's correct to point out it's not. It's a right enshrined in the Constitution. However, of course, the whole point of this particular dispute is Republicans are busying themselves with the work of claiming that it is not enshrined in the Constitution, that the words in the Constitution are open to interpretation, and they actually always are. And the one particular interpretation of this thing is that birthright citizenship is how we have understood it to date, although, always looming in the background, I think we've prepared you well here on the show, is the possibility that some coalition of 5 robed justices simply says, either with good reason or not, that that's not the way we're going to interpret it anymore. Because reasons, or because real logic, whatever it may be, in this case, probably just reasons, that can undo things. Things we think of as a right, not always recognized by everybody, and we find ourselves shocked to find out that things could be interpreted differently. But it's a good point. Heard a reporter today call birthright citizenship a policy. It is not. It is a right enshrined in the Constitution, though I was moved to respond wryly to that one by saying, so have you heard the one about how it takes 60 votes to get anything done in the Senate? Because I used to hear reporters say that all the time too, and you had to have your eyes open to the realities that are possible when you play constitutional / down and dirty political hardball and just do the things. And in some sense, it's worth keeping in mind that that's kind of what's going on here. I like to think there's a difference between smart, educated, informed constitutional hardball and just why don't you just isms and gimmitarianism constitutional hardball. They say I can't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. But there is a real point to all this, and so now I can't remember whether I put this piece aside or did I try to. I think maybe this is what I was looking in Pocket before and trying to figure out what did I must have hit I just missed the button I really wanted and pocketed the wrong tweet. But let's see if I can come up with it here. I believe it was it, I guess I probably should not guess who it was and see if I can come up with it. But somebody pointing out that it's important to realize that whether or not you believe Trump can get this done, Trump can actually, how should it constitutionally hardball this thing through and say, I'm going to make the change in how we regard birthright citizenship, whether it stands legally or not. It's important to realize that things will be thrown into confusion, lives will be affected, and the way Americans come to think about what was once understood, rightly or wrongly, to be a bedrock truth about citizenship will be in flux. There will be people who say, I believe in the president, I believe in this president, and he says that this is something he can do, and I believe it. And once you're put in that mode where some significant portion of the population just says, I now believe this to be the opposite of what we've always believed it to be, and things are in doubt, and a even if it's not plausible, interpretation is laid out as an alternative, and the justices, being political as they are invited to adopt it. Well, that's an important thing, and you really actually do have to discuss it, and maybe it does deserve coverage, though. And maybe, it will be sticking around as an issue long enough for thoughtful, progressive writers to finally do that. We initially wanted to dismiss this thing out of hand as, I suppose, a tactical response to this thing. But eventually we have to pay some attention to the possibility that the unthinkable will become the reality anyway. Okay, so there was that, and I guess the discussion of the idea of the change in birthright citizenship as policy. But then there was the, where were we? It was the Lindsey Graham tweet that also used the same language. Finally, a president willing to take on this absurd policy of birthright citizenship. That's the one that struck me sort of as just to wonder, what is it? I mean, I know they're cheerleading for their president's position here, but what is it exactly about birthright citizenship that strikes him as absurd? And it may not strike him as absurd. He might just be posturing here. But it seems to me that the simplest and most natural rule, the one that requires the least interpretation of the text, which I thought originalists were kind of into, and that turns out not to be the case. But the simplest, most straightforward reading of the constitutional text, and yes, Armando, you absolutely can discuss the birthright thing with us, but then you have to either get out of the way or let Joan talk over you. But that point is not yet here. But it seems to me that if you just read the text and give it the most simplistic possible interpretation, which is generally what Republicans do with things, to be honest, then that's it. You belong, to the extent you belong somewhere, you belong where you were born. That can be problematic in the future. But for instance, like I thought that was actually Republican immigration policy, to say you belong where you were born, and you were born in Honduras, and so go back. And, as vile as that is, well, if you're born in the United States and you belong here, I don't know. I mean, I just find that interesting that they suddenly want nuance. I now need to parse every word of the original text and come up with what the real meaning is, when in fact, you belong to the place in which you were born. It happens to be my opinion you can belong to other places as your life goes on, and they definitely don't believe in that. But I don't know. Should we make a biblical reference for them? Will that help? Do they have still ordained ministers that can help them? I don't know. My mind went to why was Jesus born in Bethlehem anyway? Oh, yes, right. Everybody had to go back to where they were born. That's not my policy. That's theirs. Anyway, we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Oh, look, here comes Armando. We can add him to the discussion here. And hey, Armando, how you doing?
Oh, is she in already?
No, she's not. But if you want to just sit in silence, I would support that.
I'll do that too.
No, okay. I've got some time. I'm not certain when she'll be free, but it happens usually after the break, somewhere between now and, say, 10:15 or so, usually. But we may be able to arrange to have you both on the air. But you wanted to make a point about the birthright citizenship in particular, or immigration in general?
I mean, look, this is beyond stupid. And the media is always terrible, but as you've read it, and Trump tweeted about it again this morning. Mm-hmm. And he hung his hat on the wacko subject to the jurisdiction thereof language.
Okay.
What is the key text? What does this mean? All persons born or naturalized in the United States, comma, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, comma, are citizens of the United States. Mm-hmm. All right?
What is the part about that you don't understand?
The part about being born is, everybody agrees that that's the whole anchor baby argument. So they all agreed they're born, so that part of it are covered. So then they say subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But if your parents are illegal immigrants, mm-hmm. they aren't. But guess what?
Yeah.
The text says persons born. The person born is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. What are we talking about? By the way, so are the parents, but pretend you want to play the subject to the jurisdiction thereof game and pretend that if you're here illegally, you're not subject to it. Let's just take that fake fact and assume it for the sake of argument. Yeah. The person born is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. It doesn't say anything about your parents being subject to the jurisdiction thereof in this text.
I am looking. It does not.
Where in the Constitution does it say, David? No. All right, and let me clench it for you because this is really it just is beyond the famous case that you've heard of, right? The United States versus Wong Kim Ark. 1898.
Yes, there was a lot of discussion about it beginning yesterday.
It's the case that's right on point. And the reason it's right on point is because look at this fact pattern, because I want you to understand.
Okay.
A child, this is from the case, a child born in the United States of parents of Chinese descent, these are his parents, who, at the time of his birth, are subjects of the Emperor of China,
Okay.
but have a permanent domicile and residence in the United States and are there carrying on business and are not employed in any diplomatic or official capacity under the Emperor of China, becomes at the time of his birth a citizen of the United States by virtue of the first clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. So here was a person whose parents were not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, as these crazy people who now say it doesn't cover people born in the United States or all people born in the United States. This is the very case that you're talking about. It was decided. Okay, you have to overturn this decision, but it's decided. It's been decided for 120 years.
Yes. I mean, you know,
It's not an open question. It can be overturned, but it's not an open question.
Yeah. Their point of distinction that they like to hang their hat on is, well, they were legally authorized to be in the United States. They weren't here well, they were undocumented probably, but as illegal, what we would now argue about people who would call them illegal immigrants. And that's different somehow, and it really isn't, but that's what they're hanging on
But
to.
you got to go back to the text. Your argument is that they're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof because they're here illegally. That's the argument, right?
I mean, I guess
So you're hanging your hat on if I'm here legally, even though I'm not subject to the jurisdiction thereof because I'm a subject of a different country.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any
It doesn't
difference
make any
because you know the either way you are still a national of another country, whether you're here legally or quote unquote illegally.
You are, to quote the case, a subject of the Emperor of China.
Yes, or in this case, the Emperor of Honduras, let's say.
Yeah, whoever. The point is that the very reason that your argument you're making has already been decided. It's done. It's cooked. It's over. There's nothing to talk about in that sense, unless you decide that Ronkin-Mark is going to be overturned. Now, of course, there's another case that people have been pointing to, but it's not exactly on point. It's called Plyler v. Doe. It was decided in 1982. It was actually about a Texas law that would cut funding or purported to cut funding to districts not fun. There was a formula where you give the X amount of money for the number of kids you have in the school, right? And Texas passed a law that said it would give less money to schools that have children of illegal immigrants in it.
Yes, okay.
All right?
Right.
And there was a lawsuit, and it went to the Supreme Court, Plyler v. Doe. 1982, the Supreme Court decided that the Equal Protection Clause, which is in the same Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, and you may know or not know, but I'll give you the key word. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Within its jurisdiction, the equal protection of the laws. And the court said, of course, people who are here legally or illegally are within its jurisdiction, ergo, the Equal Protection Clause applies to you whether you're legal or illegal. It also applies to your children who are born in the United States. Now, by analogy, of course, within its jurisdiction can be read to mirror in many ways, subject to the jurisdiction, except for the two classes that Ronkin-Mark has recognized, which is people who are diplomats or invading armies, right? Those are the two people who can't become citizens.
Oh, yes. Well, of course, then they'll later pivot to invading army.
Right. So, but you get the point here. The point is that Plyler sees being in the jurisdiction as sufficient to make you subject to the jurisdiction, and it's in the same clause. Therefore, the argument goes, and I think it's valid in a fair reading, that this subject to the jurisdiction thereof argument is stupid. What was the language added for? And now you go away from the text and you look to the legislative history.
Yes, which Scalia loved.
Right, exactly. And there have been just lies and basically misquotes to do it. The key line is about who was the subject to the jurisdiction clause directed at? It was directed at two types of people, basically diplomats. There was extensive discussion of children of diplomats in the debates, and much more importantly, frankly, the sovereign nations, Native Americans. Are Native American citizens? Well, are we making them citizens? And the answer is no, we're not, because they're not subject to our jurisdiction. There are treaties between the nations. Of course, you know what those treaties were worth. They weren't worth anything. And in fact, later, by statute, the Native Americans have been made American citizens. By the way, just as Puerto Ricans have been made American citizens by statute as well. But the argument there would be, I think the more interesting argument about Puerto Ricans and, say, people in Guam or the Canal Zone. John McCain was born in the Canal Zone.
Right.
Was he a natural-born citizen? Became an issue. And it's an issue because if you take the interpretation that they're talking about, was he subject to this jurisdiction? Was he born or naturalized in the United States? The Canal Zone is not in the United States, right? It clearly isn't in the United States as we understand it, but it is subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Yes, although we do sometimes pull strange tricks about what is and isn't the United States and how we regard embassies.
I thought John McCain wasn't born in the United States of America, unless you take the expansive view that the United States of America is everywhere that it controls.
I guess, or can you be if you're born in an embassy? Is that
you are in that's actually the United States more formally, I suppose. Yes. But is it right? I mean, that's absolutely true. Of course, this came up in the Hamdi case, which was Guantanamo. In the Hamdan case, is what does the Constitution apply? Yeah. There, and the Supreme Court said it did, and because it was subject to the jurisdiction of, and the Constitution goes with the flag, is the old saying. It sails with the flag, not just the flag, the Constitution is with it. So it's silly, in essence, to say that this clause, I mean, there's no plain reading, there's no textual reading, there's no way of looking at this and saying there's actually even a controversy. The Constitution is a mess in many ways. This clause is pretty clear.
Well, they had a long time to think it over.
They did, and they actually debated the words, and they actually said, no, everybody who's born here is a citizen, is what they said, except the sovereign nations, the Native Americans, and children of diplomats.
Yeah, well,
that's what they said.
Those would be people who are deliberately holding themselves out as non-Americans despite their physical presence here.
Right,
and
they have immunity by international law. They're not subject to our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Which
I was thinking more of diplomats there than natives, but still, to some extent, though they might choose different language. Yeah.
Yeah. My point is there's no legitimate argument here. And I know there's this guy named Rogers Martin or something like that, who's some type of political science, who's made some type of argument why it's a bad thing, but he hasn't made an actual argument that I've ever seen that makes any sense, that why it's, they were wrong. It's the same as saying, well, that's not what it says.
Mm-hmm.
Trump has that view. He's against natural-born citizenship. Okay, fine. Amend the Constitution. 34 states, go to it, or 38 states, whatever the number is, I forget. Yep. There's 34 in the Constitution and 37 or 38 in to pass it by the states, and that's what it's going to take. Good luck. Get to work.
I guess so.
It
Well,
seems to me.
I guess.
And that's what I have to say about that, because
All right.
I don't think there's much more to say about than that.
No, although people are going to say it anyway, and it's interesting to watch this thing happen in light of all the discussions we've had about the political actors on the court, and you have to keep the door propped open and say, they may, without basis, simply say we prefer this to be the outcome, and that's all there is to it. But it's somehow a little bit harder, at least, to imagine them just simply doing that right out of the box. But you never know. Trump has gone a little crazy this morning and tweeting about everything and nothing. But there's one tweet that I think stands out that's different than the others. Mm-hmm. Did you see it? His tweet about how wonderfully he was received at the funeral in Pittsburgh? Yeah, in passing, that's his take on things.
You go to a funeral and you tweet about how great how much everybody loved you at the funeral. What a great time! What a great time everybody had.
Yeah.
Parody yesterday, come to life.
Yeah. Well, right. He, I guess he probably thought that he was being the bigger person, maybe, is a possible interpretation of it. But, as usual, he's made everything about him. Thank you for welcoming me. He was distinctly not welcomed. Everybody refused to appear with him. By the way, I understand he, in reaching out to see who would appear with him, he phoned all the Republican elected officials and said he was going and invited them to be a part of his schedule and his events that day, and pointedly refused to call the Democrats locally and invite them, which is the usual protocol. No surprise that he would violate it. Of course, to me, that means, you're just declaring it a campaign event, and the campaign has to pay for it, not the taxpayers. But I don't think we'll ever get around to getting a reimbursement for that one. But, that, and apparently also a story circulating yesterday that he was telling people when he'd call up, he would say, so-and-so, some other person agreed to appear with me, so you should too, and then calling person number 2 and saying the person number 1, he said he would appear, so why don't you do it too? And just then they all found out about it pretty quickly, and that's pretty pathetic. The president is lying to people about who has agreed to appear with him so that he can trick others into doing the same. It didn't work. So just an odd thing out there.
It's a disgraceful thing, of course, and we live with disgrace every day.
That is true.
It's just shocking, and this is what we're not that great a country right now.
Well, we all have to make America great again, and I know where we can get a deal on some hats if this election goes the right way. Maybe we'll be able to get them cheap.
I hope so.
All right.
Anyway, let me spare space for Joan, and I just wanted to.
Thank you.
I just didn't think, and maybe I didn't add anything to the conversation, but it's not a difficult question. This natural born citizen question. It isn't. It's like Marbury versus Madison is a much more difficult question than this.
Okay.
There's more implication of judicial review and what it all means. I mean, the Constitution is actually pretty crappily written. I mean, let me blaspheme everybody and tell everybody.
All right.
The actual terms, the clauses, is pretty crappy. It's not very clear, and it really is. This is why it's so dependent on people acting good faith. It's a social bargain that people accept, and once you break it, as Republicans have broken it, the thing falls apart.
Yeah.
That's not that doesn't speak to good drafting.
No, but it's a different style of drafting then, and
Yeah, it's a constitution we're expounding. Blah blah blah.
Right.
Come on.
They were very into
You
it.
could just say the Supreme Court will have the power to review all cases, controversies on this and that, and we'll, there's things you could have added. They didn't. It really isn't that well drafted. And look, it's a compromise, and you're basically winking and nodding and getting things through the 3/5 stuff. I get all that, and that politics demanded it be that way. And that's what makes the 14th Amendment language so striking.
Yes.
It's
like
very
I said,
declarative.
very
It's one of the
practiced by
most
that point.
declarative sections. It tells you, you can't do this.
Okay.
This person is a citizen. Yada, yada. And that just doesn't happen much in the Constitution. Anyway, let's leave room for something important. And that means Joan McCorder.
Okay.
I saw that she
As a
just
matter of
tweeted,
fact,
so she
yeah.
should be available.
Right. She
Let me
actually
get
just
out
said,
of
"Let
her-
me give her a call." So you can say hello in passing if you like.
Hello.
Let me see if I can just add her here. Well, okay. So I check them to add, and then I have to hit the button that says add. I mean it. Seriously, you should add them. Is this going to work for me or no? Let's try. Okay, that's not that easy. All right, well, I'll tell you what.
Tell her I said hi.
Okay, we'll do that instead.
All right.
Very good. Okay, thanks
Talk
very
to you.
much, Armando. I'll try one more time. Okay, well, see, now this time it actually decided to acknowledge that I had pressed the add button. So I'll be adding. No, it's not going to work. Okay. All right, so instead of doing it that way, we'll just call Joan directly because I've now set it up where I said, okay, you should give me a call, but I will call Joan because I'm late to this party. Hey, Joan.
Hello.
Hi. So in trying to hit all the buttons correctly and make it work, Armando just said, you know what, I should just get out of here and get out of the way. Tell Joan I said hi. So, all right, this is the simpler way of making
Hi,
it
Armando.
work. All right, so he's heard that. And just as well that we clear the floor here, because, of course, we got, a couple of minutes before we have to take another break. So, busy morning?
Busy morning. They all
Okay.
are.
Yeah, well,
I'm
that's true.
just glad that we got the lawyer stuff out of the way because,
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer.
Well,
even though I
everybody's
think-
talking about it, and I figured we'd give
Yeah.
some time to it. It's complicated in that it's so uncomplicated that you have to really come up with some complex reasons to make it even appear like you know what you're talking about. So there's.
I think what's completely uncomplicated about it is that it can't be done by an executive order from the president.
It really, it shouldn't. It shouldn't be. I only hold the door open in order to remind everybody that there are potentially 5 wackos on the Supreme Court now who might literally just say, yeah, we can simply decide we want it to be this way even without real legal justification if we're willing to, embarrass ourselves and do it. So the question is, would they? I don't know that this is the thing that they would do it for. But
yeah, this
it
one's
is
a little
possible.
bit out there. This one, yeah.
There are a number of reasons why they wouldn't want this one to be it. They wouldn't want it necessarily to be the first thing that they do as a group. They wouldn't want to necessarily be that aggressive in attacking the facial appearance of what the words mean, and it's a pretty simple, straightforward set of words at that, and it would have implications for all the times that later they'll want to say, yes, we disregard things like legislative history because Antonin Scalia told us to and we love Scalia, but this time we make an exception. So I don't know. I doubt very much that they're going to want to do that.
Would Scalia go this far?
I
Who
can't.
knows?
I mean, no, I don't know. I don't think so. Sometimes, every once in a while, he surprises you with landing on the right decision, sometimes through the wrong mechanism. But, well, not anymore. He doesn't. He's dead. So, but he did in his day. That was, and sometimes he surprises you by dying suddenly. So, full of surprises he was, and now he's not. So that's the end of the Antonin Scalia
Being
story.
murdered.
Yes, right, by Trump. We knew he was going to do that. Everyone knows it. Everyone says it. Jacob Wall thinks so. So it must be true. How about that guy? I hope you were working on coming up with a headline on that.
I'm glad you covered that. It was so much fun.
I don't even know that I did. And
I will put in one tiny little thing that's kind of niggling in the back of my mind about this.
Yeah.
The doppelganger theory worked.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah, so like anything could, so why not try this?
You go out on Twitter and you start putting out crazy things with Zillow.
Yeah.
And Google Maps and who knows? It could put somebody on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Well, I guess in a world where
Jacob
that can work.
Is no Whalen. He's no Ed Whalen, so we can't say that.
No, I guess not. Which is really even not. I didn't realize that was even a thing to be. But that's well, yeah. I guess like you said, if that can work, why not try this? It does seem rather ill-conceived, and I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it, and I hope it would be great if somebody goes to jail. It would be awesome. It would sound like a very dumb idea in terms of who to target, like somebody who can actually get the FBI to investigate you. It's a bad place to start, but I guess he was the juiciest target they could think of.
They do seem even far more incompetent than James O'Keefe, which is helpful. I mean, Jacob Wall is not good at all at covering his tracks.
No, I mean, that was awful. That was really low-rent O'Keefe work. And O'Keefe is awful at covering his tracks. Yeah, everybody enjoyed it. And it has, I think, has shut him up, at least for the time being. I don't think he's still out there talking, but okay.
But is it going to put the little worm in people's brains that, hey, maybe there's something with Mueller that we have to think about? We'll see.
Who knows? So far, no. But I guess you can never tell. Well, okay, so that was a weird thing that also happened. What's been keeping you busy lately and this morning in particular?
Healthcare. As always.
Why? I thought we were all in agreement. We all love protecting
pre-existing conditions. We all love protecting pre-existing conditions, except those of us who don't.
Oh. Well,
there's a new one out today, which is quite fun.
Yeah.
The just craziest one I've seen yet, I think. Coming out of somebody who is not going to be in the Senate.
Okay.
Karen Housley. Do you know who she is?
I don't. Which I guess means she's really not going to make it.
She's not going to make it. She's the Republican running to represent Minnesota in the Senate.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks for playing.
Yes. She looks a lot like Pam Bondi, actually. I'm looking at a picture of her at Huffington Post.
Wow.
It has the story about how she has a totally new theory on people with pre-existing conditions.
I like new theories.
And this is her reason for thinking they maybe don't need so much protection. Because they're generally older and relatively wealthier. This is
okay. I mean, no, they're not.
Her reason for supporting the Republican proposals to sell junk health plans again, to allow them again, is that it's okay because people who have pre-existing conditions are wealthy enough to be able to pay for it themselves so they can have coverage that's crappy.
Okay. Now, why would anyone believe that? Because they're alive? They must have been paying for it already?
Yeah.
And that's it? I mean, okay. They're already... All right. I mean, that might actually... I don't know. It doesn't really make any sense. People were... they had insurance earlier, is what it was.
Yeah.
But
so they must be older and...
I guess people who were able to survive when they didn't have protections for pre-existing conditions must have they were either wealthy or suffering greatly. In either case, screw them, I guess.
We don't have to worry about them either way.
That is very odd. And we, of course,
that's
now...
a new one.
Yeah, that's a new one.
That's the most interesting one I've come across so far.
That is, yeah. I mean, that doesn't even work. We can ponder it over the 2-minute break and try and dissect it and see if we can make some sense of it. But I guess this is like the trade a chicken for healthcare territory.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
There you go. Okay, well, I'm glad to be in the same page. Wow, that is weird. All right, we'll take a break and be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. And we are back, and we've been chatting in the background about what the hell else is going on around here. That is one of the worst excuses for abandoning people with pre-existing conditions I've ever heard. And I still don't know that I understand it entirely. But, okay,
that's
it's
because
happening.
It doesn't make sense,
Well,
Kagro.
I guess that's
Don't
it.
worry about trying to understand it.
Don't burn any fuel on that one.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, she's going to lose, so good. I guess there was no point in coming up with a coherent policy, and that's that.
Except that we'll probably see it become the talking point for all Republicans.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter that it not only makes no sense and is a loser of a position. Again,
they have no problem with that.
Yeah, right. That's not going to stop them. And if, again, like you said, if the doppelganger theory can work, then I guess this could too. And all right, so be on the lookout, I guess. The show is equally about early warnings about idiotic things that we'll have to deal with later.
I just keep going back to how ridiculous the doppelganger theory was and how we were laughing about it and feeling, I don't know, smug that this was the best that they could come up with.
Right. And, yeah, one thing you can't ignore is they used the parts of it without acknowledging what they were doing, and I guess it just
right. They
worked.
didn't all point the finger directly at Squee after Ed Whalen decided that he couldn't do that.
But
it must have been somebody else. A horrible thing happened to her, but somebody else did it.
Right. Like, I mean, I think this could be used anywhere, I guess. It's too bad the Saudis didn't think of that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Squee did it.
Right. Gutter. It was not us. It was the United Arab Emirates. They did it. The people are confusing us all the time. But he went into your embassy. It looked like our embassy. Our embassy looks a lot like the Emirati embassy.
break out the Google map.
Right. Look even on Zillow. They're the same. They're not. They're not even. They don't have one even in Turkey. Maybe, possibly. The thing is, I'm gonna vote yes anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and maybe that's it. Maybe the doppelganger theory didn't work. It was just I am voting yes. Why are you saying things? Why would you do that? Words. Here are some other ones. I deeply trouble word. Look, I've already cast the vote. What's the difference? Print what you want to print. I voted already.
Yeah, still bitter there.
Yeah.
Still pretty bitter on this one.
I was.
But we have a week to get Democrats elected and do something maybe about the Supreme Court. I don't know. It's going to be a while before we can do anything about
I
the
would
Supreme
if I
Court.
were you. Yeah, lots of good theories floating around, and a lot of work beginning. I do see from time to time some attention being paid to people who are organizing what they figure will have to be long-term campaigns, with an eye toward doing things like either appointing more Supreme Court justices or whatever the approach is. And they got some pretty good initial PR. It made me say, boy, I wish we had that going in on the filibuster fight.
I was just going to say, that's thanks to the groundwork you laid.
Hey, and it was
filibuster reform.
It was fun to do, but it would have been fun to be fun dead when it was happening.
Indeed.
Yeah,
so, it would have been very helpful.
But these things can change, and that's the inherent danger in a way behind the birthright citizenship thing too. Oh, that's crazy. No one believes that. Well, give me some money, and maybe they will.
Yeah, this is the problem. But you wore the point of a spear there.
And now everybody's doing it.
And now everybody's doing it.
Well,
how does that make you feel?
I don't know. I am asked that all the time now about, well, now look what you did because Kavanaugh. Well, I mean, I told you at the time that if we didn't do it, they would. And then they did.
And they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did first, and then we didn't really do what we were supposed to do with it. And then...
No, we did. And maybe had we done what we were supposed to do with it, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Right. But if we hadn't done it then, if Reed hadn't gone forward with it, there would be a lot more vacancies on the federal judiciary for Trump to fill.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we did mitigate the damage that way. Well, it is what it is. So how do I feel about it? I feel fine about it because I knew that was part of the deal. That was one of the initial objections. What are you going to do if Republicans start doing this? I'm going to say that's a wake-up call. We need to win more elections, work harder. Yeah. But I like the idea that it should be clear. How long have we been saying it's all about the Supreme Court, it's all about the Supreme Court, and no one believes it because senators, when they campaign, just say, well, the reality is you need 60 votes to get anything done in the Senate, and we're going to be able to prevent all the bad stuff from happening. I'm not a big hasten the revolution type of person, but I think that if you win elections, you should be able to do what you want to do, provided that you win it without using Russian money, I guess. And, although maybe that was a bad assumption. I thought we were going to contest elections among Americans, and that was my big mistake. I did not see that one coming.
It's a whole new world, Kagro.
Yeah. So, okay. Let's, it's going to be tough. That's all I can tell you.
I think what it means is that we have to be really creative in how we look at what can be done with the Senate.
That is true.
Going forward. And what can be done with the Supreme Court.
Yeah. And occasionally allow yourself to take positions that feel like, wow, I thought that this was not the way it works. Well, if you do it and it does work, then it is the way it works. I thought that saying, this might not be the Supreme Court nominee, he could have a doppelganger, wasn't going to work, but it did work. So now everybody should do that. We should nominate only identical twins to the courts from now on. With anyone with an evil twin.
Evil twin.
Yeah, that's going to be a selective group, but, it's an elite group as it is. So I'm not disturbed by this.
Okay, that was an interesting tangent.
I didn't think I was going to go there, but okay. Well, where else might you like to take things? This is fun so far.
I really have been so focused on healthcare and how they're lying to you about it that it's been hard for me to think about other things. But of course, there are other things. For example, there's the election.
Yes.
There's Medicaid expansion in Idaho.
Aha. Yeah. Okay, so ballot initiatives with Medicaid expansion in several states. Idaho,
Utah, Nebraska, and kind of Montana. When Montana expanded, they put a 2-year limit on it, saying okay, we'll do the experiment as a demonstration project, and then if we're keeping it permanently, the legislature is going to have to come up with some kind of permanent funding mechanism, which, it's the legislature. They didn't.
That might not work.
Legislatures don't do things like that, particularly part-time ones in rural states. So on the Montana ballot is a tobacco tax funding measure that Big Tobacco is not at all happy with, but I don't think that they'll be able to stop.
Yeah.
So that's Montana.
No tobacco.
In Idaho, Nebraska, and Utah, it's on for the first time. And what's really interesting about it is how well it's doing, particularly here in Idaho. Our governor, our outgoing governor, Butch Otter, announced yesterday that he is backing it. And not only had a really good ad for it.
Yeah.
So it's now the bipartisan position to take, which makes me feel a little bit better about Daily Kos not endorsing it and embracing it as one of our fundraising things. Because I think it might have hurt.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's driving a grassroots resurgence, at least here in Idaho. I don't know about the rest of the states, but here we have a less than ideal Democratic Party structure in the state.
Right, well, ranks are thin.
And these folks, those millennials, they're driving this here in Idaho and have put together a campaign in all 44 counties, which doesn't happen. I mean, they knocked doors in Fairfield, Idaho, where I went to grade school, town of 300 people in the middle of nowhere in Idaho. They went there and knocked on doors.
All right, you can knock on all of them quickly.
What's really interesting to see is how much in all of these states it seems to be drawing people out. Voter registrations have skyrocketed. Early voting is huge in all of these states.
I thought you could only do this with marijuana.
Should have.
Sort of.
Medical marijuana is probably going to be next for Idaho on the ballot in 2020.
Okay. Well, I mean, that was what everybody touted as the key to being able to do this. But hey, Medicaid expansion. All right, I didn't think so. I would never have guessed that the list of states you had.
It's crazy. And really encouraging. Let's see, I'm just trying to see where I wrote about it to get some of the numbers.
Okay.
I'm not seeing it. I know I wrote about this in the last week.
Well, I can search those up, but it would be nice to have those numbers. But I will. I'll make a point of going through and pointing people to that in the summary later on. But I've been seeing a lot of discussion about it, and again, it's an odd lineup of states, and it's doing well. And I would have thought before you started this, I would have said, I probably would have trusted you if you said, "Don't worry about it, it'll work." Okay, fine, but it wouldn't have been my guess. I wouldn't have thrown it out in a brainstorming. I didn't
think it was going to work here. I was very skeptical until I met the folks doing it, because the process for getting on the ballot in Idaho is so difficult. And once they surmounted that, I thought, well, okay, maybe they can actually do this.
I guess so.
Because you had to get a threshold of 6% of registered voters to sign your petition in 18 of the state's 35 legislative districts. And some of them, and beyond that, you had to reach a total of 58,000 signatures. So those two hurdles were going to be really hard. You had to be extremely organized to find the 18 legislative districts where you think you have enough numbers to be able to do that. And in a far-flung state like this, in an extremely rural state, that was a challenge. And, they got 20,000 extra signatures overall, qualified in, I think, 20 or 23, somewhere in there, of the legislative districts.
All right. Did they
But
use Cambridge Analytica?
Here's what it did in Idaho.
Yeah.
Our primary had the highest participation rate in 16 years. Voter registrations are 3 times higher than the last midterm election.
Really?
3 times higher.
Where are they? I mean, and they're finding that's not a lot of space to find them. That's interesting. That's a great thing. We need to think of more issues like this, or find out, well, who is doing this organizing, and how are they doing it, and do they leave the notes?
Yes. But it's not just Idaho. Nebraska has surpassed voter registrations from 2016, from the presidential year, so far.
This is gonna
as
be a hell of
has
a thing.
Utah. It's 6% higher at this point than it was in 2016. Again, a presidential year.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting in Utah, Democratic registrations are outpacing Republican registrations 3-1.
And these are not bots.
They're
afraid.
not bots.
Okay.
They are
It
actual
worries
people
me.
registering to
Okay.
vote. And in Utah, you have to vote. You have to register by party. Democratic registrations are 3-1 ahead.
Okay. All right.
It's
weird about
remarkable
this.
to see this, and I can't pin it specifically on Medicaid expansion, but I think it has an awful lot to do with it, particularly in this state.
I don't know what else to. I mean, I guess you can attribute some of it to Trump, but
you're talking Utah, Nebraska, Idaho.
Yeah, right. And having seen at least just the headline, I didn't bother reading the millennial bashing going on in the New York magazine, but you must have seen it pass by on Twitter at least.
They don't know how the post office works, so
yeah,
they're not registering.
Yeah, but that's a real thing, by the way, as it turns out. My 18-year-old son, I had him, I said he had to send out some thank you notes to people. I said, address these things, and he's like, so what do I do? I'll write the address there. Well, where? On the envelope. No, I know that. Where on the envelope? Like, you don't do this in typing class anymore. Where on an envelope does the address that it's going to go versus where on the envelope does your return address go? You really don't know that. They don't mail anything. It's pretty amazing, but it's actually out there happening. And I guess if there was an online app to register, probably if there was an online app to do brain surgery, they'd actually be able to figure it out, and they'd be able to do it somehow, even without instructions. But if you're over 40, forget it. But yeah, it's a weird
thing. All right, all
thing.
you parents out there, your job today is to teach your child how to mail a letter.
Yeah. They really don't know anything about that. Or like, how do I get a stamp? Or what is a stamp? What do you mean? How do I get that? Where do I go? There's no stamp stores. I've never seen one.
Do they not receive mail? Do they don't know what the box out in front of their house is for?
It's the chore box. Go out and get stuff that's in it and bring it to me. That's one of your chores. That's how they understand mail. And, the mail that they get is junk, typically, or else it's, cards from grandparents for holidays and birthdays, and I know how to open those. I don't look at, how it's addressed. But again, you have to send the thank you note. And to date, it's partly my fault. Here, write the thank you note. They write the notes, and then I put them in the envelopes and send them. And now they have to do it. Like, oh, what? So I'm a little worried about that. So I don't want to.
And by the way, your kid's 18? Yes. How did that happen?
Well, every year the Earth goes around.
Yeah, it happens.
Right. It's true. So pretty soon he'll have to send in college applications, and they actually don't go in the mail anymore either, for the most part. But I guess it's some portion of it is going to have to be mailed in. I don't know. But now everybody has online applications as well. But yeah, meanwhile, they've organized your entire state somehow, and they probably had apps to do it with. And it was
yes,
great.
They did have apps to do it.
See, if it has an app, they can do it. Doesn't matter what it is.
Those millennials.
They're very
And
capable.
they had some seasoned volunteers who've been in the party for a long time helping.
I would
but
assume so.
The
still.
brainchild of this was 3 millennials.
There you go. Yeah, so I'm not huge
Idaho
on millennial
natives.
bashing. It's funny to note differences that are friendly differences between any group. And it's interesting. But somehow they have their own way of doing these things, and we either don't understand them or whatever, but wow, did that get done?
Yeah.
So, okay, that is very exciting and a great way to mesh the election and the healthcare beat.
And it's going to be really interesting to see what that does here in a state like Idaho or in Nebraska or even Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Mia Love might be in trouble in Utah. Is this going to help her Democratic opponent? We have a huge amount of excitement here in Idaho for who could be the first Native American female governor
Yes,
in
big.
the country, Paulette Jordan. Who sort of blew everybody away by winning her primary.
Yeah.
And we had a ton of new voters in the primary, and they seemed to be there to pick her. Originally, we were sort of thinking, well, maybe it was the crossover vote of Democrats to vote Republican so that they could make sure Raul Labrador went away forever. And they did.
Yes.
Yay.
Right.
But I think Republicans did that on their own. I think Republicans didn't like Raul any better than anybody else.
Yeah.
She won out and out on her own.
All right.
And there's just a tremendous amount of excitement behind her.
Well, good.
And all of the people coming out to vote for Medicaid expansion are probably going to vote for her. So,
yeah,
not
well,
all. The new voters. The new
yes.
voters. I think we're going to get
so.
a lot of. I think the Mormon population is going to be behind expanding Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see. This is going to be a fun one in Idaho.
Well, good. I'm glad they hit on this issue, and it would be. I can't think of a better. If we can win across the board, if we get this wave that we are hoping for, and it breaks the right way, and not only changing the composition of Congress, but expanding Medicaid in some of the previously red states, and electing some governors who will actually enact it. Not to end up with
and that's important too.
Yeah.
There's 1.3 million people in Florida who are in the Medicaid gap. 1.3 million people in Florida could get coverage if Gillum is there to fight for them.
Yes, and not to stand in the way. And some of the states, like where they had the battle in Maine about everything, where no matter how you pass.
Yeah, but we're still fighting in Maine, by the way.
Yeah.
So that one matters too.
Right.
There's 750,000 people in Georgia in the Medicaid gap. Stacey Abrams could help them. It's 176,000 in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the way the legislature has structured Medicaid expansion is kind of weird. I mean, they kind of booby trapped it. So that one we have to see how it plays out. But really, it's on the ballot in far more than just these 4 states, these rural western states, because it is in the governor's races too.
Yeah, an important thing, and not to be discounted that there these days a Republican governor who perhaps ought not to have the authority to stand in the way of something decided so clearly by the voters. That's no longer the way it works, at least at the moment in Maine, and who knows where else. There's so many people running as Trump copycats for every position, but in a couple of governors' races in particular, that you can't rely on passing Medicaid expansion on the ballot and pair that with a Republican governor newly elected who will just stand in the way, whether he has the mechanisms at his disposal or not.
Yeah. Oh, and one of the things that I think 8 years of fighting over the Affordable Care Act has done is raise the level of knowledge, of understanding in the general population that they've got some say in this.
Yeah.
That is important. They have a better understanding of how the whole healthcare system works, and they're gonna vote on that. Yeah. They're informed, and that's how they're gonna be looking at their vote. It's astounding to me how important it's become. It has, for the past year, been the most important issue voters have talked about, even with crazy Trump. I guess because it's the most immediate.
Yes.
This is my family's health. This is our lives.
Yep.
But also to see, and it's kind of gratifying since I've been having to write about this for 8 years. It's kind of gratifying to see that, okay, finally Obamacare is popular. People like it.
Yes. I guess that was another long shot plan at the outset that maybe people didn't think were going to work. It's the same planet, of course, on which the doppelganger theory worked. Was eventually we'll have this in place, even if it's not the ideal, and it will become the baseline, the default position, and people will become used to it. And eventually, you'll see. Ignore all this Tea Party screaming on every street corner. Eventually, America will come to accept this as the place we're supposed to be and want to build from that point. And I admit that in some of the time between then and now, I said, I don't think that might be wishful thinking.
Yeah.
But at some point it became clear, no, they are actually correct about this. I was willing to go with that as the plan at the time because I said I have no
what else
other
have we got at
alternative.
The time? Yeah.
I think you have a point, and because it will actually start doing things and helping people, as counterintuitive as it is, they will and I, even though I see people out there right now here in 2008, 9, 10, keep your government hands off my Medicare, etc. Clearly, they're willing to be counterfactual about anything to win. It's hard to believe that they'll eventually just flip on this if they could be hypocrites instead. But in many cases, they did.
They have. So, it's astounding. It's gratifying. If we can get past this time, maybe we can actually do something real with healthcare. Yeah. Not that the Affordable Care Act isn't real. It's just too many people are still left out, and it's far too expensive for far too many people.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and it's not done yet. But we're in a far better shape in terms of where the public's at on healthcare than I thought we would be.
Yeah.
It's just all the other stuff that's in the we have to fix, like having Trump in the White House and
yes, but it
and voter suppression and everything else,
which all seem insurmountable, in a way. And
yeah.
So I'm okay with saying, all right, there's work to do, and it's difficult and it's long term. But it does, in fact, pay off. And some of the people who said that it eventually would are being proven correct. And as you said, I think good word for it, astounding ways. So, okay. I guess we'll get to
what
work.
It means is we have to vote. We have to vote.
Now's a
we
good
have
time.
To get out the vote. We have to talk to everybody we know and make sure that they vote.
Yes. And as they say, usually they say, bring someone else with you. And I always think that's a great sentiment. And I've always puzzled over who to bring with me. I made my own this time. As I mentioned, my eldest 18. So I brought another voter this time. I fulfilled my obligation. It's going to be a few years before I have another. But that's a slow developing play also. By the way. Okay. Well, thanks very much. And we'll, I guess by the time we are planning to speak again, I don't know whether you'll be up to getting up early in the morning or have a voice, but there may be some good news. But we'll see. We'll play it by ear, I guess, for next Wednesday. But I sure hope that you're so excited about a huge, exciting wave of Democrats being elected to office that you can't wait to come on.
From your lips to the voters'
Yes.
levers.
Listen.
Whatever.
To the thing where they win with the votes. Okay. Thanks, Joan. I know.
Get out the vote, folks. Get out the vote.
That's the way to spend your weekend. Okay. Thanks, Joan. We'll speak again, hopefully with some great news to talk about. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Talk to you next time.
All right. Take care. And now, time to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam to catch up on the various stories of the day. And there are a number of them that we were unable to get to today, but we will catch up on in the coming days. But for now, when you stay tuned to Netroots Radio, you'll pick up the following. What exactly does Maggie Haberman mean when she says it's going to get very, very, very scary and very, very ugly if Democrats have subpoena power again? That is an interesting way of putting things. Let's find out.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, ready for more? An Oregon gun group draws fierce criticism for blaming a local rabbi for the Holocaust. That's not going to work because he backed the state's assault rifle ban. Kellyanne Conway attacked grieving Pittsburgh Jews praying for peace instead of praying for Trump's success in the midterms. And much, much more. They're nuts over there.